repairing or reassembling a Waltham pocket watch. It's a grade 83. It's a full plate pocket watch, which is a real pain. But I'm looking at a little bit of oiling here to start off with to make sure I've got the gears here in place that are nicely oiled and lubricated and ready to be assembled. See, I'm testing that out with a bench key to lubricate that up nicely. I'm using my Myers number 58 movement holder here and making sure that's all done. A little pause in the video there, I'm not sure what was causing it, but so I put the mainspring barrel in by hand. There's a result. Then I realized after I had put the barrel in and I put the barrel back into the watch movement that the spring was on backwards. So I ended up having to take it out and put it back in by hand. It has a T end on it, which is a real pain. And to get that T end to grab the hole on one side as you wind it in by hand. I've tried winding it in with a mainspring winder with the T end. It doesn't work. But what you're looking at is the same technique I used winding it in the other way. So even though it was in backwards, both holes on this Waltham barrel cap and the barrel itself were the same size. So I went along foolishly thinking I had that barrel in the right way until I put the whole thing together and then realized, oh my God, it's backwards. What am I doing? So there we go, and I very cleverly put the barrel, and look at me putting that barrel in. I think I'm doing a great job here, but not realizing that the barrel's kind of in the wrong way. And I continued here. I was lubricating the arbor on the edges so it spins nicely, and still not realizing that the barrel was in the wrong way. I didn't videotape me flipping that spring around, but I realized that I had a problem, and so the barrel's in the right way right now, so I did not do that. Then I put the escapement in very carefully and got the pallet fork out. And it's one of these lever type pallet forks. It's long. And it gave me a bit of trouble when I installed this and put all the plates down. It seemed to slow down. And so you'll see later on that I had to actually take some dial washers and cut them in two and then jam them in the post to allow the escapement to have some freedom for movement. So these full plate movements are not easy to work on. So here I'm putting the pallet fork in. There's a little hole on the top plate where you put that pallet fork in. There's two banking pins on the other side. And you take a little tiny piece of Rodico and you put it on the end, and it keeps that pallet fork in place. This video is done at ×5, so you can imagine how much time it took to do this. It's a little bit slower than what you're looking at right now. So here I'm putting the screws in place. I just adjusted the camera here, and I did notice that after I took the Rodico out, so you put the screws in like that, then you get it all together, and then you take the Rodico out, a little tiny piece of Rodico, and you can see me on the bottom side, and I'm just tweaking the pivots to get them in place. This is the hardest part of a full plate pocket watch, is actually tweaking these pivots. It's not easy. It's I don't particularly like working on these watches, by the way, in case you're curious. They're a real pain. I don't mind working on one that I might own, but working on someone else's full plate pocket watch is only because I'm a nice guy. It's the only reason I'm doing it, because they are a pain. And there's no guarantee that you'll get them running again, because this one's here from 1986 or something like that. It's pretty old, so it's just about as old as I am, I think. So here we go. I'm putting the screws in here. I didn't bother putting finger cots in here. I just cleaned the plates after. In the old days, when they worked on these pocket watches, they also didn't wear finger cots, by the way. I've looked at old films, and they didn't have those back then. So finger cots are okay for watch work and maybe for high-end railroad grade watches. But I don't wear them for, this is not a high-end railroad grade watch, but oh, I just lied. I put the finger cots in, but I grabbed my tweezers instead. Took them off, realized, hey, what are you doing? They're on the wrong finger. So here we go. You've got them on right now, but they're kind of a pain for a watch like this, because you've got to move it around a lot and you need the grip of the fingers to actually do the movement. So I think I'd take it off a little later. So now I'm putting the top plate on that holds the balance in place. And I said balance, I meant mainspring. Holds the mainspring in place. I'm giving it a little bit of a wind. Now I'm looking inside the hole there after I removed a little piece of Rodico to just tick it back and forth to see if I have movement. And after I did that, I realized that the balance staff was stiff. And if I loosened one of the screws, it had no problem. So I realized that I need to do something about this, because it's not. I let the spring down here because I was planning on taking the barrel out again. And because I realized there's something wrong here with this balance staff. I said balance staff. I meant pallet fork. So I'm moving it back and forth here and just trying to get it to freely flip back and forth. I think I did about an hour's worth of work just to try to get this thing working half decently. And again, I'm moving it back and forth and realizing what is the problem here. So I went away really quickly and I used my microscope to put the spring onto the balance cock. I didn't bother showing that activity. Then I actually got the watch running. I was quite happy. So this darn thing is running. It doesn't have a high amplitude. I think I might have to replace the mainspring to increase the amplitude, but this is really a collector's item, so I wouldn't expect this to run really well. It's also it's a 7 joule watch, so it's not a high-end 17 or 21 joule watch, so trying to get good amplitude on that was hard. So here I was touching it with the special formula or liquid grease I use for the pallet fork, and it's a Mobius 9415. It's pretty darn handy to lubricate the pallet fork and the escapement. So, and here when it stops, see, I got it going again, and I'm farting around with it right now, just saying, okay, what's going on here? When you see me shake it, I'm really not shaking it at that speed, by the way. And I lubricated all of the pivots on the top and the bottom, flipped the watch over again. I stopped the balance intentionally to lubricate the pivots underneath the balance. And then I lubricated it well, holding the balance. I didn't want to put any pressure on that balance cock because it's a pretty old watch and I didn't want it to do some funny stuff on me here. So I'm lubricating it now to make sure that all of the gears are nicely lubricated. And the pivots, not the gears, the pivots are nicely lubricated. So here I'm winding it up again, giving it a decent wind, see what it can do, holding it in all different directions to make sure it runs in all different directions. And it seemed to be working fairly well. Again, like I said, the amplitude wasn't super strong. I probably would have to get a new mainspring for it or something to increase the amplitude, but it was running pretty consistently, both dial up and dial down, which I was impressed with. So here I'm putting the minute wheel down, and then I'm pushing the cannon pinion down without resting the watch down on the base because I did not want to put pressure on the balance cock while I'm doing this. So I could have actually done this before I put the balance cock in, but anyway, I did it there standing up, holding it, and then I put the hour wheel in. Yeah, and then I put the what are they called? They're called dial washers. So I put the dial washers on, then I put the dial back in. It seems like it's a quick job, but you multiply this by 5 and you're looking at a couple of hours worth of work. So there I go, tightening up the dial nicely. And then I spent some time after. I wanted to case it first before I started working on the dial with the Rodico. And I tried to put it in this way and I was stupid. So I said, okay, no, you don't do it that way, you dummy. What you do is you turn it upside down and you feed it in like that. So there we go. So now I have it fed and I'm holding it and I'm putting in the case screws right now, and they fit nicely actually. They came in nicely and held it together well. And I put the back on. Now I can work on that dial to make sure it's nice and clean. I did a lot of work on it, getting rid of fingerprints, but some of them are mine, so I'm guilty here. And I'm cleaning up the dial. The pivot does not stick through the hole of the second hand pivot, so I wasn't worried about getting it caught and breaking it off. You always have to keep an eye on the pivot on the pocket watch as you're working on the movement. So I bought this made in China Rodico, and it's really shitty. Just in case you go out there and buy some of this Rodico, don't. It's kind of crappy. So I used it to clean things up, but it's not as good as I thought it would be. So here I'm cleaning off fingerprints again. It worked, but it didn't work. Maybe it was too new. So after I'd done that, I started going to push the hands in. So I had some fuzzy bunnies there on my hands. So I decided to clean off the pipe on the second hand because it looked like it had some thread or whatever wrapped around it from 1890. So I cleaned that off nicely. Then I pushed that second hand down. As you can see, that's how fast it's turning. And then I put the hour hand on over it and made sure it cleared the second hand. So I'm watching it as I'm pushing it down to make sure it's clearing the second hand. And after I did that, I was able to set it to 12 o'clock and then bring the minute hand in and then very carefully put the minute hand in and watching that it clears the hour hand. And I pushed it down, did a great job, cleared it nicely. And I set it to today's time, which was 3-something, 3:15 or 3:10 or something. So did that, wound the watch up again. And then I watched it really closely, and it was moving. So I had some good stuff. Clean off the glass on the crystal, clean the sides up, and there we go. It's back together, and I'm letting it run overnight, and we'll see what happens in the morning.